We will get going. We have a lot of things to get to. Before we start, just a few things from me. First, this webinar is being recorded, so you will be able to access it later. It will be available on our YouTube channel and via our website. Links to those places will be coming to you. I mean, you've gotten them already, but they'll be coming to you again in an email tomorrow. And the recording likely will not be up until tomorrow, so I wouldn't look for it before then. Second, we do have a few asks for you, or I do anyway. For those orthodontists in the United States, our 2020 diagnosis and treatment study is now open. We do this every 6 years to see what techniques, appliances, methods, other things orthodontists are doing and using. For those of you who have taken our practice study, this one is much easier to fill out, I promise you. It is still long, but it is a lot easier. So we have a link to the survey in 3 places here. One is on our website. Another is in the chat, or I just put it in here. And a third is on our Facebook page. So if you're an orthodontist in the United States, if you could take some time in the next few weeks and fill it out, we'd greatly appreciate it. For those of you not in the United States, please don't waste your time. We'll just toss out your response. The last thing I want to say is we at JCO, we greatly appreciate the support of those of you who are subscribers who are listening to this. For those of you who are not subscribers, we would appreciate you giving us some consideration when you're in a more comfortable place financially when this is passing. A subscription to JCO not only gets you the monthly journal, but also complete access to our online archive, as well as free access to all of our webinars. Unlike these COVID webinars we've done, our webinars are usually $100 a piece for non-subscribers to attend. If you are a subscriber, you get them for free. We will be running an AAO show special, even though there is no physical show. So if you use the code AAO20 at our website for the next few months, you'll get 2 extra issues for each year. So that's 14 instead of 12, or 28 instead of 24. So that I am done. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Maru.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, good morning, all. And thanks for being here, even though you didn't get to see my face as we began. And welcome to all those who are attending, and thanks for joining us for part 2 of the COVID-19 webinar series. Today's webinar will focus primarily on how to get our practices back to functioning after this unprecedented event. For those of you who were able to attend our first webinar last week, you'll recognize many of the faces here on the screen. But we're also honored to add 2 more to the list. To introduce all 8 panelists, we have Dr. Luis Carrier from Barcelona, Spain, Dr. Mauro Cosani from La Spezia, Italy, Dr. Gail Glenn from Dallas, Texas, Dr. John Graham from Salt Lake City, Utah, Dr. Neil Kravitz from the Washington, D.C. area, Dr. Mark Lemchin from New York City, Dr. Jay Bowman from Michigan, and Miss Jackie Dorst from Florida, who runs a consulting practice called Safe Practices. So a huge thank you to each one of you for being here and for taking your time to share your wisdom and knowledge with us. This webinar will have 4 segments: preparing your office, preparing staff and patients, clinical changes, and contingency issues. We will have a question and answer segment at the end, so feel free to submit your questions in the question and answer segment or section on your GoToWebinar page, but we'll answer the questions at the end. So to not keep you waiting any longer, let's kick it off with a discussion on preparing your office to reopen. For the first question, we're going to direct that to you, Ms. Dorst. How do you foresee our bays and clinical areas changing and keeping them safe and compliant after this pandemic?
The biggest change, Dr. Maru, is going to be controlling the aerosols that we create when we're using, say, a high-speed handpiece, or even doing a bonding, or you're using the air-water syringe to rinse. The aerosols run the risk of transmitting the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So we need to make allowances, and the challenge is the open bay. Most orthodontic practices are designed not with individual treatment rooms, but with an open bay that will have anywhere from 4 to 12 chairs in it. So we're going to have to allow to segregate somehow those aerosol generating procedures so that we are not running the risk of cross-contaminating the chair next to it and for the aerosol suspensions. So it's going to involve both the physical facility and the scheduling of patients. We can't schedule as tight as we have in the past, where we have each chair occupied with it. And I know Dr. Bowman and I have gone back and forth many times about looking at the physical facility and with the chairs especially in the United States, the way that they're designed, very often they're only 6 to 8 feet apart. And so Dr. Bowman came up with a lot of creative ideas. So I think that's going to be our biggest challenge. The other items that we'll be talking about today, we pretty much have developed a system in the last 4 weeks of how we can do that with patients coming in. We're going to be talking a little bit later about taking their temperatures and doing a wellness screening with them, and reducing the number of people in our reception room. And of course, many of you've had the parents be welcomed into your clinical area. And right now, that's not going to be the practice. Yeah, if you've got that anxious parent that is really, or a child with special needs, then you're going to have to make allowances. But many of you have also looked at, how can I create a private room? Can I take one of the treatment rooms, treatment coordinator rooms, seal it off and make it even, I know Dr. Bowman and I have gone back and forth about making a negative pressure room. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bowman and let him comment a little bit on that.
Oh, great. Thank you. Obviously, nobody wants to hear about having to put in a negative pressure room or an aerosol isolation room and things of that sort. I'm sort of have an advantage in that I had 2 rooms. One was an instruction room, and another is a scanning room where we had one of our scanners, digital scanners. And both of them, one had a door, the other did not, and neither one were plumbed. So they did have dental chairs. And so we looked at first simply putting in plumbing to put we use a electric handpiece, so it's a high torque, low RPM handpiece for removal of appliances or adhesive. And that was our first step. And so that's in process. Then the next step was, what could we do to filter the air that's in there besides having the high-speed vacuum system, which we all have. So we looked at these relatively inexpensive items that you can buy that filter air, like for nail salons, or there you have the Healthy Air system, which has a couple of filter systems in it. And then I took Jackie's advice and I contacted our heating and air conditioning people, who the person that we use has experience in doing negative pressure rooms, and not particularly for dentistry, but they were in the last couple of days and found some very interesting information. The first thing I would tell you to do is go into the room that has your high-speed vacuum system. My practice building is about 20 years old, and the first thing we found was that the high-speed vacuum that you're using, where does it exit? Where does the exhaust go? And we found in ours, it exhausts right into the basement, right under the floors of our clinic area. So that was the first red flag, is what are we going to do about that? We need to have it exhaust outside the building. So that's one of the first things we're going to do. Second is, I'd put off putting a new furnace in. And when we're going to do that, we're adding in a module that will increase the circulation of the office in general, and also includes HEPA filter and UV filter. Then he found a device, a module, and I can give the specific name of the one that we got. It's from the brand name is Microcon, and the model is EXC7. I don't know if that means anything, but this is an FDA compliant ceiling mounted HEPA filter module that we can put in. These 2 rooms are not connected, but we can connect the 2. And this one module will filter both rooms at up to that 12 circulations per hour. And then we can exhaust it in any different way we want and monitor how much pressure is coming through just a normal door. It doesn't have to be a sealed room. And we can exit this to the outside of the office if we desire and flip a switch, and it's a negative pressure room. So all these things sound horrible, but you know, back in the 80s, I worked without gloves and we dipped pliers in a sterilization liquid and put them back in the next patient's mouth. So yeah, it's bite the bullet, but it may not be quite as painful as we might think. Now, I don't have a quote for doing this procedure, but I think this is going to be less onerous than what we'd originally expected. So with that said, back to whoever else.
I guess I'm next. In our office, we've been investigating all of these options, and to finish up what Jay was talking about, the microcons seem like a very good device. I think you often have to put a second blower in them to get enough pressure to get negative pressure out of them. On their own, they might not produce it.
It just depends on the size of the rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think you have to seal the ceiling off, because otherwise they'll suck the air in through the, if you have a drop ceiling like we do, it sucks the air in through there.
Yeah.
So it really has to come in. And supposedly, according to the people that make this, you could put it right back into your HVAC system because it is sterilized with UV light and filtered. So there's lots of options for that device. We have ordered a number of those roll around units that provide high-speed aerosol suction next to the chair, and they use a UV light and a HEPA filter before they exhaust it into the room. And I think that's going to be something we use. And in our bay, we're looking at how we're going to separate those chairs. We might lose a chair in the process, but there are lots of options, including, you know, if you're not planning to redo your space soon, you could spend some real money on fixed partitions that are very nice looking if you can squeeze them in there. And there's other things, we found a manufacturer for almost, it looks like a plastic curtain that's thick mylar and or plastic, and you can hang it off of the grid of your drop ceiling to separate the chairs. So almost more like a splash guard, because it certainly isn't airtight. We also are looking into, and we've gotten some pricing on putting UV lights in the ceilings. So at night, the UV light goes on for an hour and sterilizes the bay and the individual treatment rooms. And there's a second unit that you could roll around if you wanted to do the waiting room. But all those things are just good until the next person moves into the area. So it makes sense in a treatment area where you're going to clean it and the next person will come in. But in the reception room, once the first patient comes in, unless you're going to clear everybody out of there periodically and give it another treatment, which can only could take 30 to 45 minutes. The UV lights do produce a little ozone, but not enough to be dangerous. And they're quite effective at sterilizing, disinfecting the area. It seems like 99.9% is the number, but of course, we all know that there are a lot of people that make up 0.1% of this society. So I agree with Jay. I think a negative pressure room, we should have those if we can manage to make a few. We should use roll around suctions next to chairs whenever we do anything with hand pieces. And it should be noted that even low speed hand pieces produce aerosols. It's not just high speed. And of course, other things are cavitrons. Every time you use your air syringe, you're doing it. We don't realize how much we put in the air. And something someone else was not, we probably haven't even thought of, is when we go to trim a retainer. I mean, we take it over to the machine and we trim that retainer. Where do we think all the parts of that retainer are going? So those are all the things that we've been working on in our office as far as physical barriers and air movement. Okay, so I guess the next person is Glenn.
Excellent. Well, thank you three for addressing that. Prior to moving to the next question, any other thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Jackie what she thinks about the fogging devices and the HOCl materials that are non-toxic to fog an office. Let's say once in the morning, once at lunch, and after work, like they're using on the airlines.
I have to say that I haven't investigated that as thoroughly as I would like to before I provide either a recommendation or an endorsement on it. It's certainly an option, just like the UV disinfection is an option for it. I think the thing for doctors to be cautious with whenever they're looking at any of these adjuncts or options to treatment is safety. Safety
Right.
for the employees and safety in the environment. I know in hospitals, they've been using UV lighting for a decade to disinfect patient treatment rooms and the OR. And it depends on both the power of the light and how long you're exposed to it, how effective it is. The room has to be pristine clean. If there is any debris on the surface, the UV light is not going to be effective. The same thing, remember that light only touches the surface that it shines on. And if there's a shadow underneath, such as under the edge of equipment, on the bottom of a delivery unit or something, you're not going to provide disinfection in that area. And where Dr. Limchin was talking about the rolling units, they look like a little R2D2 that rolls around the space with a UV light. That's been used a number of years in hospitals, but it does have limitations. So remember, it's an adjunct to the basic environmental cleaning and disinfection in a surface. The fogging with chemicals, you have to allow a certain amount of time for that chemical to evacuate before people come back into the area. And Dr. Limchin even mentioned with the UV lighting, you evacuate the people and then turn on the UV light, because both of those methods are used to kill cells, living cells. So if it gets on our living human cells, then again, it could be detrimental to the human beings that have to be in that area. So you do have to investigate it. I'm so glad that Dr. Bowman had a HVAC engineer to come in and look at your office. That was one of the things that you and I both shared information and continued to learn. And I would advise any of the other doctors that are looking at remodeling your office, if you can find an engineer in your area that is a member of ASHRAE, you know, that's their society, ASHRAE. They have an association, and those are the engineers, not just the guy who maintains your HVAC system. And then evaluate it, because bottom line is you want to have 6 air exchanges per hour as a healthcare facility. And you might be able to explain that a little more detail, Dr. Bowman.
I don't know if I can explain it better than you can. I think our entire office is going to exchange between 4 and 5 for just the changeover we're making for the entire office, which was necessary with our heating system. But this the unit that Mark and I are talking about, depending on the square footage you have for these rooms, which ours are pretty small, he felt that we could get up to 14 exchanges per hour if necessary. But
Wow.
we can, yeah, it's amazing. It said we could even hook up a third room, but we don't have a third room to do this in. So it's a lot less onerous. I'm going to have to look into what Mark said about our ceiling, but just to have that filtration plus the thing that you're talking about, R2D2, and your standard high evacuation that the hygienist is going to use, I think that's quite a lot. I want to go back to the fogger for a second, because I have to give Jason Cope a lot of credit. It's nice if you have a second person that you're working with. So we get to throw things back over to Jackie when she has a chance, but we're both looking at a lot of different options and kind of following each other. And maybe we're going crazy. Maybe we're doing way too much. We don't know, but we feel safer with what we have in plan. And the fogger, that material, you can buy these for your house, the hydrolyzed water, and then you in fact put a charge on it. That stuff will go all over. And it is non-toxic. It has no scent. It evaporates quickly. The only thing we don't know is how effective it is as a disinfectant, but it could be wiped on as a disinfectant, and it's safe for people. And again, it's used in some hospitals, we know, and in some airlines. So that's something that Jack and I hope we'll talk more about. We've ordered one of these devices, but it won't arrive for a while. These things are sold out as well. So.
And Dr. Bowman, I'll mention that the endodontists have used the hydrolyzed water that you're discussing for sterilizing a root canal.
Absolutely.
For a number of years, that's been an effective method for them, and very much more safe than a toxic chemical.
Right.
That's great information. Gosh, kind of in a similar vein to what we're talking about here, and thank you to you three for that. As we start to move out of the clinical area and start thinking about the other areas of our office, the waiting rooms, the toothbrushing stations, the bathrooms and things, if I could turn to what are you doing to modify those?
Who did you ask for? You were kind of breaking up, Mike. I'm sorry, I couldn't tell who the name was.
Shoot, I was looking for you.
Oh, okay, good. Well, then I'm okay. Then, well, I'm lucky. I do want to make a couple of comments before I talk about that, and then I'll just be very brief about this. And here are the comments that I want to make. I think that as professionals that are leading the charge on trying to advise other orthodontists and other dental professionals, especially orthodontists, how to safely coexist with the SARS-CoV-2 virus going forward, I want us to all keep a couple of things in mind. The first one is that there are a lot of young orthodontists who have been nearly bankrupted by not working for the past 2 months. And I really worry about giving advice regarding a lot of expensive equipment that, to be very honest with you, has never been proven in an orthodontic office with regards to SARS-CoV-2. Negative pressure rooms work. When I was a surgeon in the hospital, we had neutropenic precautions on patients where we had to have negative pressure rooms. They certainly work. They are, but you have to have a real negative pressure room. A negative pressure room means that the door slams behind you because the pressure differential is so great between the outside atmosphere in the hallway and the room inside. Anything less than that, and it's like the TSA at the airport. I mentioned this yesterday. Most of it's cosmetic. The reality is, if you have negative pressure, are you assuring that the droplets are all being sucked in through the negative pressure and out of your office, and not onto a staff member's clothing, onto the metal surfaces, onto the chair? What I worry about is that a lot of money will be spent, but are we really going to be protecting ourselves, or are we going to make ourselves feel like we are? And listen, I hope everybody practices the way that they want to, and I hope that a lot of this discussion is driven by how comfortable are your staff, because the staff need to feel comfortable working in the environment that they're in, and if they do not, then you lose the confidence of not only your staff, that then gets communicated to your patients, and you're going to lose the confidence of your patients as well. What I'm working dutifully on right now with several other orthodontists is to do something, to get something in print as quickly as possible, so that we're not. Here's my biggest worry. My biggest worry is that policymakers and bureaucrats get wind of orthodontists saying we should consider doing negative pressure rooms, we should consider doing a lot of these things, and they already ignore orthodontists, policymakers do, when they're talking about OSHA requirements, because they lump us, at least in emergent situations like this, they lump us with general dentists. And in their mind, every procedure is a high aerosolized procedure, which isn't the case, obviously, for 80% of our patients, right? And so we've got to differentiate ourselves from general dentists. If we don't, then we're going to have barriers up for the rest of our lives, in between chairs, at the front desk, barriers that haven't even been proven to work. They haven't. Believe me, I've read every single study, at least in English, that I can find on at least on SARS-CoV-2. And I'm not saying that I'm the expert on SARS-CoV-2, because I'm not. But here, and I need to calm down, so I'm going to have a little Diet Coke.
That'll help.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Sadly, it's a Diet Coke, so it doesn't help that much. I will step back into my lane, however, and talk a little bit about preparing our non-clinical areas for living in a post-SARS-CoV-2 environment. And I think that the first thing is going to be herd management. Not herd immunity. Sadly, we're probably not going to have herd immunity from this virus because of all of the things that we're doing that will prevent us from gaining herd immunity from this virus. But herd management. And so one of the things that we're going to do, and a lot of you that are listening to this have massive practices. I do not. I used to have a very big practice. Ever since I moved to Salt Lake, I have not. I've wanted to keep it small. So I see between, a busy day for me is 70 patients. I prefer 55 to 65 patients, but even that I think is too much in an environment where we are trying to measure the amount of flow that we have into our office. We personally are going to have empty chairs between each treatment chair. I have a massage room, not a massage room, you know what I'm saying. I have a room that has massage chairs in it. That's going to be rolled off. One of the things to think about is that if you're going to have instructions to your patients about staying in the parking lot, which I think is a very good idea. I think everybody should be in the parking lot, but for one parent and one child. Half of my patients are adults, but that ought to be the rule. Where are they going to hear that rule? That you don't want them hearing about it in the waiting room, because everybody's going to come in the waiting room. Now you got 12 people in the waiting room as you're telling them, hey, get back into the parking lot. So part of it is communication, to let your patients know long ahead of time that, and there's a local orthodontist in Salt Lake City that I think is doing a really brilliant thing, and that is he sent out an email. They sent out an email and a text to all of their patients saying that when you arrive at our office, you will text us at this number and tell us that you're in the waiting room, and then we will either text you or come down to get you when we are ready for your next appointment, so you don't even enter the building. I think that's brilliant. I think that move alone will do more than probably most things, other than some personal protective equipment. I think that will do a lot. One of the other things that I wanted to mention is that non-contact thermometers, they're cheap, they work great, down to 1/10 of a degree, and so every single person, but not only every person, every staff member, and every staff member twice a day is going to have their temperature taken. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. I don't expect someone to develop a fever 4 hours from now. Part of this is perception. And I want our patients to know that we are not only taking the temperature of the people that we are examining and taking care of, but also of ourselves. And that is going to be communicated to our patients. So between a questionnaire, temperature readings, staying in the parking lot until you're called in a very respectful and nice way, herd management, so to speak. And one last thing, this is something that I've done ever since I had my new office a few years ago in Salt Lake. I tried to do everything opposite of a dental office because I wanted to change the feel for patients. And so one of the things I did is I purchased all electric handpieces, mainly and primarily because the high-pitched whine of a high-speed handpiece is a trigger for every human on the planet. It doesn't matter how spa-like your office looks. As soon as they hear a drill, they go into a cold sweat. So now you can still hear it with an electric handpiece, but it's different. I think electric handpieces are not a bad idea. They don't rely on an air turbine to turn the burr. The motor is in the head of the handpiece. And now a little tiny bit of air still does come out. I don't want you to think it's completely airless, but it's by orders of magnitude less than an air-driven turbine handpiece, and we don't use water. You have to be careful because electric handpieces rely on water to keep them cool because the motor is in the head of the handpiece. It isn't being cooled anywhere else. So if you don't have water running through there, then you have to be very measured in your debonds. You can't just motor through and then take adhesive off of an entire arch, or A, you're going to ruin your handpiece, and B, you're going to burn your patient when it touches their lip. So we do one tooth and we wait a few seconds, and then we do another tooth, wait a few seconds. It's just management is what it really boils down to. But I think using an electric, now they're expensive. So I prefaced all this with, I don't want to further bankrupt. They're like $5 grand a piece. So I don't want everybody to feel like this is mandatory, but I already have them in my office. And so I suggest that as something to consider, or even one, have a SARS-CoV-2 handpiece that you buy, and the rest can be tucked away until this nightmare is over. That's all I have to say.
Can I make one comment about the thermometers? Be very careful. Read the specifications because they're not that accurate. And if you read the specs, you find out that you just can't take a temperature on somebody walking in off the street and have it be accurate at all. So it depends on each brand, but we've already looked at these and we've gone away from the touchless. We're going to go to the traditional medical thermometers. And I don't know how important this is going to be in the long run because people coming in may not have a temperature and they can still be a carrier. So maybe Jackie can come on that. But
Right.
I'd like to hear what Mauro and
That's a good point. I will
Mark
say,
have to say.
yeah. Let me just make
And
one
they're
comment on that.
also,
You do have to be careful. Don't buy just your first one on Amazon. We use the ones that are used at the emergency room at University of Utah Hospital.
There are also
And then you need to
kiosks
have
almost
team
that you
Jackie,
can
can't
buy.
hear you.
right, Graham?
There are kiosks
I-
that you can buy. There are kiosks that you can buy, or almost looks like an iPad. You put it on the wall, and the patient can stop in front of them. It automatically takes the temperature and says you're admitted or you're not. So you can automate that whole process, and it makes it a third party, and they're sophisticated. Some of them can get pricey. It's a way of making it more permanent, where they check themselves on their way in. And the other thing, of course, is we send out information before they come in, telling them what to expect and who to bring and who not to bring, and what kind of paperwork they're going to have to fill out to come in, because now we got the thing from the orthodontic insurance companies about having them sign a particular kind of release. So there are lots of little changes there, but the temperature stations are great, and I think that's going to be something we add to every office.
Exactly. And
Dr.
even
Glenn,
if
I
you're
could turn the time
using
over to you.
this, like a traditional thermometer, you can get the plastic sheaths that will go over them. Or Dr. Bowman and I talked about using these disposable thermometers, and they're readily available on Amazon, inexpensive. But the important thing is to get an accurate temperature. If the traditional infrared that you buy at Walmart or Walgreens, it can vary as much as 2 degrees. So you may think you have a patient that doesn't have a temperature, a fever, when actually they are above 100.4. So that's one of the things to practice with your team before you start seeing patients, to verify that everybody is familiar with the wellness screening format, the questions they're going to ask, and how to take an accurate temperature.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I just wanted to say that Jackie did a webinar yesterday for the AAO, and she had some great suggestions on that webinar. I saw the slides afterwards, such things as just asking the patients and the accompanying people to wear a mask to the office, as we talked earlier about texting when they arrive, also having the patients brush and floss real well before they come to the office so that we can minimize the use of the toothbrush sink. And we already talked about, screening the staff and doctors ahead of time. So Dr. Kazani, that's all I have. If you have anything else to add, now that we have you back.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have some guidelines from one of the biggest Italian association, and I try to put all together. But I also say something that we decide to do. First of all, I'm very lucky because we are 2 in the practice. So we made 2 teams, and they don't mix each other. They don't see each other. That is something that for us is very important. Now, the waiting room, we put a plexiglass in front of our secretary, and we decided not to have anybody in the waiting room. So I think that, and basically that is a big difference. And also we do a lot of triage before the patient comes in. So we want to know if the patient had fever the day before and the same day. And what is very important, at least it seems very important, is to know if also parents or companions had fever. Because as far as we know from, we had a very interesting webinar this morning. The majority of the infection came from on the family or in the hospital. So it's very important to know what's going on in the family if somebody has somehow some symptoms. Then we tell the patient to come mask, and if you have gloves, we give those. They to stay with gloves in the office. And we decided to have the bathroom and the bathroom for the only patient, and they go to the prints with what is that? Okay, they rinse anyhow, and then they put the mask on back, and they go to the clinic. Of course, nobody is allowed in the clinic, and we decide that one person is responsible of cleaning everything. Every single time the patient goes in the bathroom, everything will be clean, and the window will be open. And I was listening about this negative pressure and so on. When I asked for the engineer to check what was going on, they told me that there is, I have a lot of windows, and they say if you keep open the windows for 5 minutes and both sides, and it's very important. It's not that is better. It's just that you reduce a lot of the possibility of getting infected. So if I have to give a suggestion, keep your windows open, always keep your windows open, and give somebody responsibility of cleaning everything, because that is something that is very important too. Let's say that they rinse with hydrogen peroxide, and that is something that is in the guidelines. I don't know if that is gonna help. Probably the virus is gonna recreate in the saliva, but at least you have some better, at least at the beginning, the first 5 minutes that you work. What else? Not too much.
That's excellent. And for those that are on the screen, as well as for Dr. Dorst and Graham as well, so in our office, we've had a tough time getting the PPE that we need. Where are you finding that? Where are you purchasing it from, and has it been an issue for you as well?
I can tell you that it has been a little bit of an issue, but if you're creative, you can actually find multiple. Most are from China. Most of the N95 masks are from China, and you can actually find a fair number of distributors that don't require you to buy a full container full of 800,000 masks, which is typically what you need to do if you're going to buy direct from a manufacturer. Given the circumstances, I think that they are relaxing those requirements, and so I have a distributor that was given to me by my brother, who's a general dentist, and he received his masks fairly quickly, and I might, after I get mine ordered, send out that link to everybody. Just kidding, I'll send it out to everybody. Gail, have you had a hard time sourcing your PPE?
Things at the N95 disposable gowns, those are the it's like, which probably group practice, so in ortho, so concern. And we're also having people in Dallas just trying to reopen the school.
Gail, I think you're breaking up a little bit. Mark, were you able to hear Gail? Yeah, I think everybody's breaking.
The sound was breaking up for me also.
I'm going to break the fourth wall here. I want no more than 2 people up on webcams at one time. I think we're doing much better when we have fewer webcams, and hopefully that will help us power through this, whatever technical difficulties.
That's brilliant. Everybody bail. Everybody bails.
So I think Dr. Glenn,
somebody needs to be on there.
We didn't really get you. So if you could repeat what you said, that would be great.
So hopefully you can hear me at this time. I was saying that yes, in Dallas, we're definitely having problems getting the N95 masks and the disposable gowns. And this is a problem not only for private practice, but also at the Texas A&M College of Dentistry here in Dallas, trying to get enough PPE to reopen for the students. So we're all finding that if we do get a supply, it's a very small amount.
Dr. Glenn, let me ask you this. Is the N95 mask, do you think that that is mandatory, or were the normal masks that we were using prior sufficient?
I think the that's really a big question, and the verdict is not really out. I'm thinking for high aerosol procedures, it would be recommended. If not, they're saying a regular mask that fits well plus a face shield would be recommended. So as long as we're not seeing symptomatic ill patients, hopefully that will be sufficient.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's move on to the next section. So we've been talking about preparing our office now, and we're going to be moving to preparing our staff for this. So the question is, and we'll start out with Dr. Kravitz. Are there any changes that you're making to how you staff the office? Shifts, our office managers working from home, things like that. Hey, Coach.
Yeah, hey guys. How can you hear me well? Everybody hear me well? So, I think what we're doing at our offices, we're doing the best we can. So right now, we've even opened it up to how many staff want to work. About 50% of our staff even want to come back when we can come back. So for right now, and I mentioned this last time we spoke, I have some staff working to answer phones. So I have an office manager in each office, and I do have one person addressing emergencies. When we get back to work, and we don't really know what date it is, which has been very hard for us because we get an estimated date and that date keeps getting pushed back. We are not going to have a full staff, which is okay because we're not going to have a full schedule of patients. I am going to work a very long day just to ensure that we don't jam people to the schedule. So we are shutting down chairs, and staff can work. If they do want to work late, they will get paid. So to answer your question specifically, we will have some staff stay late. We don't have a staggered schedule just yet, but I will likely have to pull some staff from other offices to allow me to work a later shift. But ultimately, the responsibility goes on the owner, and I'm going to be doing a lot of work by myself, late at night, to try to kind of get through the schedule. It's going to be a lot of long days. The hardest thing is we just don't know what the schedule is going to be like when we're back open. So that I hope that answered some of the question.
It does. Thank you. Same question to Dr. Carrieri. In Europe, what are you doing?
Yeah, good morning. How are you? Look, we are now at this point, we are visiting the appointments that are emergencies through through Zoom and through WhatsApp as well. And at this point, it's working quite well. But when we start, we will have a new scenario in which we will not be able to visit our the same number of patients as we have been seeing in this nice webinar. So the most important thing is to try to minimize or to distance or to expand the necessity of appointments of our patients on the next appointments. So it will be very important that on the first day that we start, we visualize and we adjust the treatments to be effective enough period of time in which we can, instead of seeing the patient in 1 month, maybe push this patient in 3 months, and during these 3 months be able to work, have this work done, or at least be able to monitorize together with the patient, virtually speaking, and ask him to do use of several auxiliaries that he can be using in the distance and can be adjusting in the distance in order to squeeze all this period of time being effective with their treatment. So this will be another PPI, because if we can increase the time that the patient is not coming and decrease the number of appointments, this will be, I think, another PPI for our office. No?
Luis, I want to add to that. I think that's perfect, because I find that what we're going to have to do is stop anything that's active. So I find myself, when I come in for emergencies and I try to avoid it, I'm removing Herbst appliances. I'm removing things that could be problematic. I think that my first month back is going to be a lot of removing reverse curve wires, removing these active appliances, and stepping back into heavy night ties. And like you said, I'll see you in 3 months.
Yeah, it's very nice point. But also generating the scenario in the appliances that we are using, in order to foresee which will be the next steps, and foresee what can be done by the patient, by himself, monitored by ourselves, by our staff, virtually, to go for the next stage without coming to the office. So this will be, the orthodontics will change completely, in my opinion, completely, 100%. And we need to adapt and see the type of orthodontic treatment, the orthodontic treatment that is minimally invasive or maximally effective in between appointments, trying to make it as a PPI, no?
I wanted to jump in really quick, if I could. That's a great point. I think you're right. I think for the next few months, at least, Luis, orthodontics is going to change dramatically. And the key to that, in my opinion, is communicating with the patients. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, everybody, perfect, clear.
Okay, so the thing that I think we're going to have to deal with is there's a lot of pent-up demand in our patients. Most of them, obviously, have been very patient up until this point. They've understood. But they're going to perceive the opening of our doors as, hey, listen, it's all about me, the patient now, and I'm the only one in your practice. So get it all done, do everything like you normally would. And I think what we need to do is prepare ourselves and prepare our patients by letting them know that we had to cancel almost 1,000 appointments. And we have a lot of breakages. We've got a lot of issues that we were able to not treat in an emergent situation that we are going to need to see. And so we need to send out a communication to our patients and let them know it isn't going to be business as usual. We will do our very best to keep you on track as much as possible, but you will not be on track, because nobody on earth is on track right now. And so we will do our level best, but we need to explain to our patients that we are cutting our patient number in half, or whatever makes sense for your particular practice. Tell the patients in a communication. We normally see 65 patients. We're only going to see 35 patients, but we will stay open 5 days a week, maybe even on a Saturday, whatever it takes. Let them know. But they just need to understand it isn't business as usual, along with all the other things that we've already talked about, so that the expectation when they arrive isn't, right on, man, let's just keep on rocking and rolling. Let's just carry on like nothing ever happened, because just like you said, orthodontics is going to change very dramatically, at least for the short term, very dramatically.
This pandemic is upside down our specialty, but we can deal with that as professionals. We have technology. We have wires that are very helpful. We have technology, and we orthodontists is one of the things that is very interesting. That orthodontics is very creative, has been creative always, and the creativity is how monitorize and how to have a small orthodontist at home in every patient. How to generate a small orthodontist at home with any patient, and monitorized in the distance by the doctor, no? Or the staff.
I think a couple of things listening to you guys. One is, I think it's really important to say, like, we got that little health questionnaire we're supposed to ask before a patient comes in. Have you been sick? Do you have a temperature? Anybody in the house sick? Anybody positive? And one thing is to send them the list of questions that you're going to ask them when they get to the office, before they get to the office, so they don't come to the office and want to sort of not tell quite the truth because they've already taken the time to travel to the office. Prepare them for what it's going to be like, and that we're going to take their temperature. We've divided our office into 3 teams, so we're going to run 3 shifts, 2 6-hour shifts actually a day, and 6 days a week, and that's how we're going to deal with that. And again, you can't have the teams mixed; they have to be apart. The other thing that we're going to have to do is try to monitor treatment. Hold on 1 second, just have to close.
Yeah. So it's according to what Mark was saying, no? Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. And the other thing, there are technologies available where the patient can monitor themselves at home a little better. And one of them will even supposedly tell us if a wire is active or not. And I think that's a very interesting thought, to have a third party essentially evaluate a wire and tell us it's still active. So we can say to that patient who was supposed to come in, you know, we've looked at your wire remotely and it's still working. So why don't you take another 4 weeks before you show up? It's that kind of monitoring that's going to make them feel that we still are looking at them, but we don't need them to be physically in the office as much. And so
I would like to point out something very, very quickly, is that also the practice that was before was everything about talking will not be anymore anything about talking. So this means that the explanations about the treatment evolution, the explanations to the parents, the explanations to the patient shall be done at the beginning until we don't have immunity, shall be done in virtual reality, in virtual appointments. So this is something also to brainstorm about.
For sure. Yep.
Hey, Mark, can I ask you a question? Are you having your front staff, like your administrators, your treatment coordinators, also wear masks, also have gloves on when they go in to present? So let's say this is whatever day we're back open again. We're now ready to see patients and, most importantly, consultations. Are you having, I'm assuming your front desk wear masks, gloves? Are you going to have a barrier between them when you on the consultation desk? You know, so not just the back staff, the administrators as well too. I just wanted to hear your opinion. I really look up to you.
So we looked at putting up barriers. I've seen some nice looking ones put up. That's an idea on the front desk, or having the front desk wear face masks. I think people will expect that. I think the staff will insist on something, because you're going to have 100 people talking at you every day. I would feel very threatened myself. And we might even have to put little dividers between their workspaces so they feel a little safe from the sides. I think, as we said earlier, our staff is going to really determine a lot to what degree we really have to do this. I'm not sure, I'm not sure how important gloves are in that case, unless you're working on the patient. The more important thing is washing your hands all the time. So I think we have to give the administrative staff protection as well. So most likely in the beginning, I'm sure the first days that people come in, they're going to be wearing masks and face protectors, and we'll have barriers up as well to protect them.
I just wanted to pop in really quick. I think that we need to make sure that the patients come in with masks on. They understand that. We tell them that before they come in. If we're asking them to do it, then of course all of us are going to have masks on. There's no doubt about it. I'm very resistant to putting up a plexiglass wall for a lot of reasons that I mentioned a little earlier, and I have a lot more, but I won't go into right now. One of the things I did want to mention, however, is, and Mark, you are correct, I've been using a third-party service that I'm not here to plug any products, so I won't mention it, but it does tell you whether or not the wire is still active or not. It requires that you upload an STL file along with photographs, and then the artificial intelligence then utilizes that to do a pixel by pixel comparison of the changes that are happening, not only on the teeth, but in the wire and all that. The one thing I did want to mention, because I see it happening all the time, are people wearing gloves. Gloves do you absolutely no good unless you touch something and then you take your gloves off and throw them away and put a new set of gloves on. I see people at Costco with gloves on, but they're touching everything. And then they're touching themselves, and they're touching their card. And I'm like, what's the difference between your skin and your glove? There's no difference at all. So as long as we set the appropriate expectations up, and above all, not set up a false sense of safety when it isn't really there. In fact, sometimes you could make the argument that you're going to set up a situation where people become a little careless because they think that the barriers are protecting them instead of just, common sense.
And I think we're going to have masks in the office for the patients as well, because some will arrive without masks, undoubtedly, and you don't really want them in the office without a mask either. So you have to have some level of protection for them to put on.
Love it. John, let me ask you this, and you're okay to plug a product. We're all curious what the artificial intelligence that you're using. We've had a few questions on it prior to we move to the next question.
Hope you're muted, John.
Thank you. I need artificial intelligence to help me unmute my microphone. It's dental monitoring. Dental monitoring is relatively impressive. The artificial intelligence that they've built in. It isn't just for people with Invisalign. It's people with active appliances with wires, and so you put the wires on, brackets on. Patient comes back and you scan them. Now you have an STL file that you load into dental monitoring. So it has a baseline and it knows what the wire was like when you scanned it. And now it's monitoring for changes in the wire. And once the wire has several scans where no changes in the wire have happened at all, then the wire has fully expressed itself as it would in that patient. Whether it's a reverse curve or not, it doesn't matter. If it's not moving, it's not expressing. So it's dental monitoring.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I mean, I think all of us are going to be looking into some form of that in the future. Let me bring Jackie back on, if that's okay. As we start talking about PPE, what do you foresee as kind of the standard of what we're gonna use? I know Dr. Glenn started talking about it a few minutes ago with N95 masks versus regular masks. Could you just give us your thoughts on it?
Dr. Maru, thanks, because I did want to offer an alternative to the N95 mask. Ideally, that's going to give you the seal that goes around the face, and that's the basic difference between an N95 mask, if you will, and the traditional pleated mask that we've worn. And with what CDC has offered to us, a traditional mask, level 2 or 3, so that you're getting the high filtration with it, along with a full face shield, is adequate aerosol protection for orthodontic treatment. So you don't have to go out and spend $20 a piece for those N95 respirators. I feel very comfortable recommending a high level filtration, traditional, called procedural or surgical mask, with a full face shield over it, because that's going to provide the additional aerosol protection. It's all about the aerosols. The SARS-CoV virus is carried in those heavy, wet droplets of aerosols for up to 6 feet. So as long as we can get protection from those aerosols, it's not the tiny that SARS-CoV-2 virus is 0.125 microns. Yeah, it is a small particle, but it's going to travel in a heavy, wet droplet. So let's just get the protection that we can. I'd much rather see your team members wearing a clean procedural mask with a full face shield than going to a dirty N95, wearing it for 3, 4, or 5 days because they can't get an adequate supply of N95. I think in the dental profession, as we go toward the future, that yes, you'll wear an N95 when you're doing laser procedures, when you're generating a lot of aerosols. But for the type of aerosols and the volume that we create in ortho, the procedural mask, high-level filtration, and full face mask provide the team with infection. And as Dr. Graham said, it's all about assuring our team that we're doing everything to protect their safety and well-being, as well as our patients.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that.
One question. Just take a look to high volume evacuators. This kind of vacuum that it places in top of the patient and makes an aspiration of the 90% of the air that we are spreading with high speed. Okay, high volume evacuators.
Yes, the HVE that you can add even on your suction unit, there's an adapter that looks like a funnel that can just, and it's autoclavable. It's a plastic that you can clean and autoclave. That can be added to your HVE, and you have the assistant stand there and aspirate all of the aerosols close to the patient's mouth as you're doing the debond. Yes, Dr. Graham.
It sort of begs the question then, if it's the case, which it is, that either a level 2 or level 3 mask plus a face shield is adequate for protection of droplets, then why would you need to have a high volume evacuator near a patient beyond a suction? Why would you need to have a plexiglass wall if indeed a face shield used wisely and changed appropriately along with a mask is adequate, then why do we need the other adjuncts?
Dr. Graham, your question was, why do we need the other airflow precautions if the PPE is adequate? Because we're protecting the other team members that may be in the open bay area, as well as the patients who are going in and out of our office. To preserve PPE, you may have asked patients to wear the cloth mask that they wear and bring in with them. So as OSHA says, when you look at the hazard abatement reverse pyramid on it, PPE is the least effective, because you may have someone who put on an N95 mask and didn't go do a complete seal check with it and may have a gap around it. So that additional protection in this time where we don't have complete data on the virus to know with research what is going to provide protection, we're adding an extra layer of protection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes sense to me. I mean, I think that if the other staff are also wearing the shields and masks all day long, as they should be, then really, and we're wiping down as we should be. And the problem that I have with OSHA is right now, and I have read every document that they have published. Every single day I'm reading it. None of it has to do with orthodontic offices. None of it. And in fact, the dental recommendations so far don't even have anything to do with dentistry other than emergency situations with emergency patients and dealing with emergency patients and patients with suspected COVID-19 infection. So I want everybody to be very alert that when you're reading these regulations, and that's why I initially started this conversation with my very, very, very sincere concern that we need to be the ones that dictate where we go moving forward in protecting our patients, and not letting policymakers and legislators, because they don't know what an orthodontist office is like. They have no clue. They barely know what a dental office is like. They've got their hands full with a lot of stuff. And if we're not careful, they're going to bankrupt us, with all of that. And not to mention, I saw a recommendation yesterday that said that every single patient ought to have, a provider ought to have a removable gown in between every single patient.
And that's
that actually was on the
ADA. Yes.
Right. That's
and
amazing.
I don't think that applies to ortho. I agree with you.
But they didn't say that, right? They didn't distinguish that, which is unfortunate, because some of us would be throwing away and filling landfills with 140 gowns a day. They didn't even think about that. So that's why I just want everybody to read and to be cautious, and to, it's important to turn to the CDC, OSHA, the ADA, but we need to read it in context, and we need to use we're all gifted with understanding, some more than others. I mean, this is your gift. I mean, you understand all of this, but we all should be reading these studies. We all should be reading the recommendations and applying them. And if they don't make sense, we need to challenge them and say, why is that being applied here? Because it doesn't make any sense.
You're right.
That's my only point.
As I was reading the documentation and a new isolation gown for each patient, my thoughts were, if you do an intraoral scan, you don't need to replace your isolation gown. Right. It has been the standard in hospitals when they're dealing with a C. diff infection, a norovirus infection, a MRSA infected patient, because they're dealing in multiple body fluids, let's say,
no doubt.
And all the touch and splash surfaces. It doesn't apply to our orthodontic risk of transmission.
That's correct. And even on hospital floors, I spent a lot of time on hospital floors, and I'll tell you something, that is not common. Having to dress in a gown, a full gown, is not common, but for the burn unit, the intensive care unit, it's rare. Sometimes you do it on a general floor in a hospital, but it's rare. So even that needs to be analyzed, as all of us are doctors, with our brain and our eyes, and actually think about what's being asked of us, and make sure that it is really helping our staff and it's really helping our patients, and it isn't just checking a box that a bureaucrat said this is probably a good idea.
John, can I add something? In China, the first patient was recognized with COVID in December 12th. Before January 20, all the Chinese dentists, I mean, in one, everybody was working with the normal protection. So before January 20, so the virus was circulating at least for 2 months. You know, there are in the hospital and in the big stuff, there were 1,200 dentists that were wearing just gloves and normal masks. And out of these 1,200, you know, there was just a very small amount of people that get infected. So it might be that what you were saying is somehow not so crazy. You know, maybe we are overreacting, but you know, the problem is that the spillover probably was in October. Nobody knows exactly what was going on. And so we are probably trying to put belt and suspender and something else. But you're right. You know, we get bankrupt if we follow all the indication. You're absolutely right. But so far, nobody knows what's going on.
That's correct. And if it was isolated, if this was just us, it doesn't make any difference. You can do whatever you want, wear whatever you want, put up whatever you want. That makes total sense. Here's the problem. We're being watched, and we're being watched by individuals that have the ability to affect policy decisions in our country and around the world. And so we don't live in a vacuum. And so if we're not careful, those of us that people look to for guidance or advice or whatever, however misguided that may be, I think we just need to be careful, because if all it takes is for a legislator or a lobbyist or a policymaker to say, well, wait a minute, I've got the webinar. I saw what they said here. You guys absolutely need to do X, Y, and Z, even though it may not be scientifically provable that it's helpful. I just think that's important to keep in mind. I am not discounting anything that's been said here today. All I'm saying is that we should just be very cautious and read and use our brains. That's all I'm saying.
And I'll add one more comment, Dr. Graham, with where we're looking at policy that is being made. Please, tomorrow the ADA is hosting along with OSAP a webinar that is by Eve Cooney and Kathy Eklund on the new ADA guidance. So please log into that, please watch it and contribute your comments after, because it's going to be policy for the American Dental Association that they're recommending to the entire profession. So I think we all need to be aware of what's going on and make our contribution to it, or what's being said, I should say.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
I think John has really good points, and certainly the things that we're attempting to do in our practice might sound a little out there or a little crazy or extreme in some circles, and yet I think that some of the changes that are going to come from all of this aren't going to be that bad, and probably would be useful besides this virus and what comes next, just cold flu season, just making things safe for our patients. So I appreciate what John is saying, and not letting legislators and rule makers and epidemiologists rule us. We need to be a part of that. So I'm glad that Jackie brought up that meeting for tomorrow too.
So
may I add one more thing?
Of course.
You know, in Italy, they are trying to make a difference with procedure that create aerosol and procedure that don't create aerosol.
Right.
So, Dr. Bowman, while we have you up there, can I throw out this question to you? And it's in a similar vein. When we talk about the way we practice our clinical protocols, do you see all of these changes affecting the way you practice orthodontics in general?
I think there are going to be some changes, just like the other speakers have discussed. For us specifically, we've been meeting, this management team of mine. I just have 4 of us right now still employed, coming up with our protocols, and certainly we may change some of our treatment mechanics or thoughts, but right now we're really focused on the logistics of getting patients into the office. we're going to start out by retasking staff members. So we have new duties we'll have a greeter or screener, as everybody's been talking about, taking temperatures, et cetera, at the front part of the office, and those folks never go to the rear of the office because of the differences in PPE, et cetera. And then the patient is transferred down. We have a long hallway, and they will be seen by what we call a scribe or a recorder. And so we're going to work in teams of 2. So we're going to cordon off 2 chairs, 2 chairs, 2 chairs, 2 chairs. So this team of 2 people, one a scribe, one the assistant for that day, one doesn't touch the patient. They're recording in the computers. They're taking photos. They'll have PPE on, but not the same as the assistant that's actually working on the patient. So in that regard, we can then disinfect one chair in this group of 2 people while the other one is being used, and then we swap that over, and then we'll communicate with the front office folks to call and talk to the parent about making another appointment and what procedures were done, because they're not going to see me like they used to, because they used to come back in the back of the clinic. Now they're going to have this, maybe a virtual appointment if necessary, but the information has to be transmitted to the parent in their car or at home later on. So yes, taking appointments, expanding them, or having them be longer durations between appointments, more active wires for longer periods of time, less active devices in the mouth, all that stuff we agree with. So I think, does that answer your question, Mike?
It does very much. I know there's just been a lot of talk on, again, how often between appointments are we changing the way we look at things? If I could actually ask from the European side, Dr. Carrieri, is there anything that you see changing up as well?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. In my opinion, we have to squeeze our minds to make our projects, our treatment projects, as more efficient as we can. And for this, we have technology, because we can communicate virtually with our patients. We have technology in orthodontics because appliances has been goal-oriented designs. So today, the technology that we have in our hands can be squeezed at the highest level. And also we have creativity of the orthodontist. No? This is very important because my expectation is that we could perfectly finish a big percentage, means probably an 85% of our cases in 5 appointments, perfectly. If we squeeze the technology that we have, if we brainstorm on how to have the small orthodontist at home, monitored by the doctor, to do the next steps that we would do. So this is a matter. We would see the patient. The patient will be scheduled to have the appointment every month by the treatment coordinator. On Monday, number tal, you're going to have the appointment with the doctor. But the doctor will appear in the computer. And we will brainstorm according to the monitoring of their tooth, the original scan, what he has came in, and all this stuff. And we will be able to monitorize this and see and say, you will do this and that, this and that. So this will be, in my opinion, will be the way orthodontics is going to change. Aligners will increase because also make it easy, but aligners can be has a double-sided, because aligners is not always a matter of success. Aligners also has to be well-oriented, goal-oriented, in order to do not complicate our treatments. We need to arrive into good solutions, no?
Excellent. Anyone else in the group like to chime in on that aspect, or we can move on to the next?
Put one camera, no? Another one? Yeah.
No. Let me ask you this. There's been some discussion. We've done a lot of virtual appointments, many different types. Everything from a quick screening to looking at a wire. Are you going to continue to use those once we're back to practice, or will you cancel those out?
I'm going to, because one of the things that is very important is that today we are visiting emergencies. But during our practice, we are going to have the appointments that will be distinguished, the virtual appointments in between the real appointments will be virtual ones. So it's not a matter of saying, bye patient, see you in 3 months, no, or see you in 4 months. No, it's a matter of saying, hey, every month you're going to report to me with pictures or a scan done by your telephone. You're going to report to me how this is going. And we are going to brainstorm together via a message, via a virtual visit in the computer. We are going to brainstorm which will be the next step or how this is evolving according to what we expect. That's it. Amazingly, technology, we are far, but we have never been as closer to the patient as we are today. This is very interesting. The patient is coming to our office, is seeing us for 5 minutes, but now can have ourselves in their house with the computers.
Thank you. Final question under clinical changes. Let me throw this out to Dr. Kozani. We've had a couple of people ask for your opinion on this. Are you changing the way that you are treating based on this pandemic? Your treatment methods specifically?
Telling you the truth, I mean, for me is, yeah, let's put this way. Yeah, I mean, there is a great changes. And as Luis put it up, we are orthodontists, we are creative, we have to do something. But for sure, at the beginning, you know, for a period, not having open bay, less patient per day, try to avoid aerosol, and try to do some different thing that you are used to do is going to be something that you are going to do. For sure, we are trying to get to something that is a little bit simpler, and you forecast less emergency. And of course, you know, I would see that probably aligners were gonna grow because you know they allow you to have less emergency. That you don't want to see a patient every month, as Luis said. But still, you know, I think excellence and trying to do our best to finalize the patient the best we can is something that you have to take in consideration. So of course, we're going to have virtual visits. Of course, we're going to see less patients per day. We're going to have changes, but our goals are not going to change. So all of us are working to get to our goal of excellence, trying to see the patient less. Now, I have to tell you something that is my personal opinion, and I would like to be quite clear. Everything will be changed. Everything is going to be changed. It's not like before, but this is a period that is going to end. You know, let's say that this is a period. It's not going to be forever. And
this is true. This is true. But also, it's something in the mind of everyone. When is the comeback? When is the next one coming? So this is something that we have to also brainstorm. No?
Luis, I agree 100%, and I am instructing my patient how to show me the best in a virtual way. That is something that everybody will do. You know, there's no way. I mean, everybody will do appointment, you know, virtual appointment. That is something that we have to get used to.
Dr. Carrier mentioned this just a second ago. If we go back to practice and we see a spike again in winter, like a lot of people are forecasting, how are you planning for that?
So you are talking about the second spike in the winter?
Correct.
You know, let's say we might think about what is going on. This virus, we don't know anything about this virus. Now, in Italy, something is happening. We have a huge amount of people that are infected, and we have the patient in the intensive unit care that are going down. What is the meaning of that? Probably the meaning is that we are somehow find a way of treating this patient. So it might be that, you know, everybody's waiting for the second spike, but if the second spike is something that we know how to deal with, and we're not going to have the huge amount of people that get hospitalized and a huge amount of people that get in the intensive unit, and then a huge amount of people that die, probably, you know, we're going to see the second spike in a different way. No, we are seeing here, and we are probably 1 or 2 weeks behind you. We are seeing here that, you know, we have huge amount of people that are infected, and there are, you know, people that are going to the unit care is going down. So if this is something that you can be treated at home, maybe it's something that we can deal with. But for sure, if something is going to happen and we are not prepared, and something is going to hit us very badly like it is now, you know, what we do is pretty simple. You know, we are ready. We're going to, you know, we divide ourselves into teams. We are ready to do virtual appointment. We are ready to work with more aligners. We are ready to do something that, you know, is going to create less emergency, something that is going to work longer in the mouth of the patient. And everybody's going to do that. But I really, really, really hope that if the second spike arrives, we are ready. We are ready, you know, medically speaking, to deal with this and making something more stronger than a flu, but not something that takes you to the intensive care unit and to make you die.
That's great insight. Thank you, and thank you to everybody. Let's move to the question and answer portion of this webinar. We've had a lot. So throwing this out to the entire group right now, I've seen this come up a couple of times across the board. With all the changes that we're making to PPE and potentially, you know, changing the way our offices are structured, do you foresee changing your fee schedules or increasing prices due to it?
I'll answer quickly. No, I don't see how you could. I think you're going to have a hard time getting people to come back in the first place. And if you start increasing fees for this, I think you just shoot yourself in the foot, especially if you have it as a separate fee. I'm out.
May I say something? May I say something?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. No, the problem, in my opinion, the next month is not going to be a medical problem. It's going to be an economic problem. So we're going to have, I mean, at least in Italy, we're going to have a lot of people that will be at the lower economical level that they were when we started this COVID-19. So that is something that we have to face more than the medical problem. You know, for me, is the economy that is going to be the biggest problem that we have to face as an orthodontist, because people first they have to eat, then they have to dress, then they have to have a house, and then maybe they think about orthodontics. That is for me is going to be the biggest problem that we're going to face in the future. So no, I don't think we're gonna we will be able to increase our fee, but we're gonna increase the cost that we're gonna pay for.
That makes sense, and I like that insight. This question was thrown out to Jackie and to Dr. Graham. Should PPE be changed after every patient? And are there differing levels of PPE per procedure, meaning a D-band versus a wire adjustment?
Dr. Graham is going to be on this also. And I think, yes, there is different PPE if you're performing non-aerosol procedures. As we discussed a few minutes ago, going to a level 2 or 3 mask along with a full face shield, having that an isolation gown, but being able to wear it for extended use from patient to patient if you're not generating a volume of aerosols. And maybe you have that one dedicated chair where you have an electric handpiece, as Dr. Graham has said, and that's your debond chair. And that's where you take care of patients. A lot of times we know if we have a patient come in that even has a bracket that's off, that we're going to need to pick up the handpiece. So we schedule them in that chair. You can use the other patient chairs for those non-aerosol procedures. If you pop out an arch wire and replace it with an arch wire, there's a little bit of splatter and splash, but not the aerosols. And the aerosols are the defining risk for us. And we need to identify those procedures, know what the PPE is for aerosol generating procedures, and then the others procedures, we can have extended use of our PPE.
I think you said it perfectly.
Excellent. So Dr. Graham, for you, it was asked, if you don't mind sharing, what is the brand of your electric handpiece that you use?
Yeah, it's a Cavo. In fact, I took a photo of it last night, or had a staff member send me the photo of it because a couple of people were asking about it, and so I have it right here. It's called Comfort, the Cavo Comfort Drive 200XDR. I'm going to say that again. It's the Cavo Comfort Drive 200XDR, and then the motor that goes with it is just called the Comfort Base. And it looks like that is the motor. That costs $17 million. And then there is the top, which is an additional $240 million every 5 minutes. But that's what that looks like.
We use the same ones, John. We love them too.
Yeah, they're great. They really are.
One thing about the electric handpieces, I definitely want to switch my own office to electric handpieces, but I did look into whether Cavo, and I spoke to a couple of manufacturers, anybody could really say that it produces less of an aerosol, and they won't say that. So there is no, it sounds reasonable that it should, and I agree. Some people are using surgical handpieces also where the air is evacuated out of the back of the handpiece rather than over the tooth to produce less aerosol. But I can't find any documentation that would tell us that somebody studied it and found less aerosol from an electric handpiece, and even low-speed handpieces produce aerosols evidently. So I'm not sure how much of it is.
You're absolutely right, Mark. And just as we have no study at all that shows that HEPA filters or plexiglass or air exchange units do anything for the SARS-CoV-2 virus. We don't have anything. We don't have anything at all on any of this. Zero. Believe me, I can say that. I'll bet my kids on it because I've been reading nonstop. And I want to make one plea. This will take me 30 seconds. I really want, we're doctors, and I just wish that people would start reading about the virus and the studies. And here's my point. Last night, there was an article, a very inflammatory article that came out from the chief medical writer for the AP News. And it had to do with hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin as not only a bad combination, but it was actually deadly. Patients were dying. So I took probably 16 minutes to read the actual study that was done. It was a retrospective study across several VA hospitals. The study had absolutely nothing to do with the inflammatory article headline, zero. It was the opposite. And in fact, the study had left out a couple of very important things that are done when you're treating people with particular drug regimens. And the population was largely African-American with multiple polypharmacy and multiple medical problems. So here's my point. My point is we can't just know what we're told to wear, what we're told to do as far as protecting our staff, ourselves, and our patients. For heaven's sakes, we're doctors. It isn't hard to read the data and to read the articles. And I'll tell you something, there aren't a lot of them out there, so it's not overwhelming. I would just beg doctors to do that, orthodontists to do that, because that is going to arm you with comfort, with not only for yourself and your family, but also for your staff. And you can explain to them all of these things and the studies that are coming out. It's not hard to do, so that's my only plea. I'm getting off my soapbox now.
Thank you, and John, Dr. Graham, since you're still on with us, I've had probably 30 people ask where you mentioned somewhere that you could get N95 masks, or there was a link somewhere. Is that shareable?
Yeah, everything is shareable. So it's on Alibaba, and I'm going to read it to you right now. Probably the easiest way to do this.
You can type it into the chat and say send to all.
Well, actually, let me just look at this really quick, because it's an image that my brother sent me of the actual page on Alibaba that he typed in. And I want to make sure that it's something, and I know that it works because he got his. He ordered his and he got his about a week later. And I just want to make sure. I just sent it to somebody else who was asking me the same question. And it is, okay, so yes, I will type in this lady's, Miss Nicole Deng. I'm going to type in her info. The portal that you would be searching is going to be on Alibaba. That's where my brother got it. And as long as I have my phone up, I want to show you one last thing, which would be a good thing to end on, and that is this. And this is not a joke. This is real, and I want everybody to keep this in mind when we're talking about entering into a landscape where we're not being active participants in forming and educating the policymakers and doing something instead of just sitting around. If we don't do something, this is what's going to happen. This is in Sweden. That's real, and that's real stupid, because that's not helping anybody. That's not protecting anybody. Got a big hole. Now I'm not done yet. I got one more. That's in Sweden. Now, you know, it's funny, but listen, there are regulators that would love to have all of us do stuff like that. This is not AIDS. This is not HIV/AIDS. The vector of transmission is different, and the mortality rate is inconsequential compared to something that, at least at one point, we had no cure for. And so I just want everybody to keep all of this in context, that we're rational doctors, and you need to be studying this and understand what you're dealing with. And it takes the fear away, but more importantly, it emboldens you to be able to look a policymaker, legislator, regulator, I don't care who they are, you look them in the eye and challenge them and say, I've read the data, and I want you to explain to me why you're saying X, Y, and Z, because what you're saying makes no sense. So defend yourself. If you have done the work, you can do that, and you can do it respectfully. I'm not saying to be a jerk. I'm just saying be respectful about it. But it's the only way things are going to get done is if they know they're dealing with doctors that know what they're talking about. And so that's my last thing. So I really am out now.
Well, thank you for that. And before we finish, Dr. Graham, if you just remember to type that into the chat and send it to the entire audience, or just send it directly.
I'm typing right now. I'm typing as we speak.
Yeah, privately to me only. We're good. First off, thank you to everybody that stayed with us today and listened through this. I know we had a couple of glitches with audio and then restarting the webinar, but we really appreciate you being here. The 8 panelists that we've had, all of us at the JCO believe they are the best and the brightest out there and have just as much knowledge, if not more, than anybody else. So we appreciate each one of you for sharing that with us. So just a huge thank you. We will be putting this up on the website as well as on YouTube, so you can rewatch or go back and pull specifics if you need it. And until then, thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Best of luck with everything.
And we will fix the gaps, so the recording won't have all the crazy gaps.
Even better.
But I'm still waiting because I haven't seen. I'm waiting to see that come through on the chat yet from Dr. Graham. So we're gonna hang here. Pressure's all on him. I'll just say while we're waiting, a big thank you, of course, to all the panelists. We do really appreciate everything you do for JCO. And Also, a big thank you to Dr. Maru. A lot of work goes into these webinars, and he does a lot of it. And we really appreciate everything he does, and putting this one and the last one together, and all the scrambling behind the scenes. He's a big part of a lot of that. So thank you very much to Dr. Maru for everything he does for the webinars, but particularly for these two ones, because they were obviously more complicated, and any technical issues we had were definitely not due to him. So thank you again, Dr. Maru.
Thank you, and of course.
And Dr. Graham says 1 second as he's continuing to try to type this in. Okay, so there, and in the chat right now for everyone listening, is the person you are looking for on Alibaba. Is that correct, Dr. Graham?
That is absolutely correct, and I'm going to give you the name of the company really quick right now, typing it in as we speak.
And for the benefit of the recording, so people who are listening to this later who cannot see the chat, I will read this out. It is Miss Nicole Deng, and that's Nicole, last name Deng, and the company, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation probably, is, I'm just going to spell it. The first name of the company is WUXI, and then it's Fine Packaging Company. So WUXI, Fine Packaging Company, and the mobile phone is 1-892-114-2631. So again, that is where you can get potentially some PPE if you're having trouble. The address is in Huishan, Huishan, in Jiangsu, Jiangsu province in China.
I think if you just look up Nicole Deng on Alibaba, you will be able to. And if you know that her company is the Wuxi Fine Packaging Company, you'll know you're there, and then you can click on her product tab, and you'll see it.
Great. All right. Well, thanks to everyone, and we will have this posted sometime tomorrow, hopefully. So thanks for everyone for attending, and have a good day.